The philosophy around we should not be eating vegetables at all, it's a bit far-fetched.
A lot of people follow these types of diets in order to just lose weight, but they don't consider just overall health.
Consequences.
Absolutely.
People usually have an ideology that they follow, and I never had a one-size-fits-all because there are no two human beings the same. If you look at the research on paleo dieting, there's no success after the 6-month mark. And that's because in this day and age, we are not hunter-gatherers. Intermittent fasting isn't a free-for-all to eat from midday to 4 o'clock like some people think.
That's what people think it is.
Some people think it's whatever you want to eat. Any diet that tells you that you cannot eat a certain food for the rest of your life isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
Preach. It's about how you feel, your energy, your mood, and all of that plays a part in all of this. Welcome back to the Chew on This podcast. I have a very exciting and interesting guest, actually. We've been talking about topics, and I've literally said, hold the conversation because this is something that we need to discuss on the podcast. So today I have Moodi Dennaoui with me today, known as the Diet Doctor, and I'm just going to get straight into it. Moodi, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
So let's talk about you being the Diet Doctor. So firstly, where did this come from and what is your unconventional approach to dieting? So talk me through it and why it's so unconventional.
People usually have an ideology that they follow, and I never had a one-size-fits-all because there are no two human beings the same. I started working with a lot of elite athletes in the past, NRL players, boxers, celebrities, musicians, actors trying to prepare for roles and things like that. And I was writing first for fashion magazines, not for fitness magazines. So GQ, Vogue, Cosmo Bride and things like that. And then I went into the fitness realm, and the first article that came out in Men's Fitness when I was working with one of the elite boxers at the time, Billy Dibb it was, and the heading was The Diet Doctor. I think because when they tried to analyse what it is that I had studied at a tertiary level, there was such a vast array of different areas that I had delved into up to a PhD level, so that they didn't really know what to call me. And I think and it stuck. After that, it stuck. And that's when I got into the fitness magazines and started writing for Men's Fitness, Men's Health, Women's Fitness. Had the privilege of getting the cover a few times, but that's in the past.
Wow. I actually didn't know that about you. That's really impressive. So when they referred to you as the Diet Doctor, talk me through it. Is it because you cure with nutrition? Is it because you transform with nutrition? What is it that you do with nutrition and diet that makes you like the Diet Doctor?
All the above. So initially what I'll get them to do is a blood test, not a regular GP blood test, but something that an endocrinologist would do. So a comprehensive hormone blood test. Look for any deficiencies, whether they're usually people who followed a diet philosophy or ideology. They may be following a macro protocol, but most of the time they're micronutrient deficient to some degree. So I look for a micronutrient deficiency if there is one, and if that is the obstacle or the hurdle that we have to overcome, then we overcome it with food, with intelligent supplementation, and an exercise regime that works for the individual, because there's no cookie cutter program. See, I'm not against any food ideology, and I make an effort to say ideology. I don't want to disrespect anyone that's dedicated their entire life to a philosophy and then call it a fad. Although sometimes in articles that I've written in the past, like for Huffington Post, they will come up as a fad diet, but I don't choose the headings. But they are ideologies at the end of the day. And they do work for some people, but for most people that have a job or they have to have human interactions, it's very difficult to follow a very regimented protocol when you have to have a temperament that is not too sensitive to other human beings. You're going to have to interact with people. You're going to be challenged cognitively. In the days of COVID, intermittent fasting would have been great because you don't have to deal with people as much other than the occasional Zoom call. But in a regular day and age, like in this day and age, it's very difficult to do something like that for a long term.
So when you talk about food ideology, talk me through some examples. And talk me through, when you do give these examples, tell me the pros and cons of each one.
Okay, well, I did some radio interviews in the past for Triple M, and more recently to cover all the ideologies, and we spent an entire hour on each one. That's how deep you can dive into some of these topics. So we spent an hour just discussing paleo. We spent an hour just discussing intermittent fasting, keto dieting, an hour on each one. But in summation, paleo is a diet that follows the caveman diet from the Paleolithic era, anywhere from 200,000 years ago to 2.5 million years ago. And it's based on no processed foods. However, the flaws lie in the studies not being longitudinal. My background is research methodology. So if you look at the research on Paleolithic or paleo dieting, there's no success after the 6-month mark. And that's because in this day and age, we are not hunter-gatherers. To cut out processed food entirely, or to say that we should be eating fruit sparingly, is what the paleo diet says, is something I don't agree with. Because depending on the region, in that era, fruit may have been a staple in the diet. So there are a lot of loopholes within paleo dieting. The argument is that we ate predominantly just protein, some fats, some good fats, plant-based fats. We ate fibrous and cruciferous carbohydrates, not many starchy carbohydrates like sweet potato. And fruit was ate, like I said, very sparingly. And fruit has so much to offer with regards to micronutrients. And the argument is, okay, maybe in Greenland, that may have been the diet back then, but how about in the tropical regions? Are you saying that they didn't eat fruit much? I think all they ate was fruit. So it's not really bulletproof. And after the 6-month mark, progress tended to plateau anyway.
When you say progress, are you talking about weight loss?
Not so much weight loss, because the scale is not really a true measure of success.
Yeah.
In the beginning, for somebody who's very overweight, it might be, and it's okay, because seeing the numbers go down can be an exciting part of your journey.
Yeah.
However, when I talk about progress, I'm talking about body composition, because to lose weight, eat less; to gain weight, eat more. But to improve your body composition, to improve the relationship between muscle and fat in favor of muscle, that's a science. To do it whilst improving your cognitive functioning at the same time, that is science. To have better tunnel vision, to improve your ability to perform, that is a science, whether you're an athlete or whether you're an academic.
So you spoke about paleo. What are the other 2 food ideologies, like top 2, that you would say that is quite common in today?
It was low carb, but I think low carb is not zero carb. Low carb is just less than, say, 150 grams of carbohydrates, but not less than 50 grams of carbohydrates. That's not so popular anymore. Some people do carb cycling, but I think the most popular would be intermittent fasting, and I would say keto dieting. Yeah. What a lot of people don't understand about intermittent fasting is that it was a precursor for keto dieting. Intermittent fasting wasn't a standalone ideology. It was introduced so that the human body can prepare for ketosis, because intermittent fasting isn't a free-for-all to eat from midday to 4 o'clock like some people think.
That's what people think it is.
Some people think it's whatever you want to eat. Like, I've walked into restaurants and bumped into I bumped into a friend once in a restaurant, and there was so much food on his table. I just assumed that his guests hadn't arrived yet, because it was too much for one human being to consume. And I thought maybe they were washing their hands, getting ready to come sit down. And he said, "Take a seat." I said, "No, mate, looks like you got company." And he said, No, this is for me. And he said, he didn't say intermittent fasting. He said, "I'm intermediate fasting." So a lot of people say that, by the way. And when they say that, you know that they haven't done their homework.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm intermediate fasting." I said, "Okay, what does that involve?" And he said, "I eat whatever I want from 12 to 4. Some people will say it's from 12 to 6, or a 6-hour window. But if you look at what intermittent fasting was designed to do, it's a 2,000 calorie a day diet with 0 carbohydrates. And twice a week, it was 500 calories. Now they've changed it to what's called the Fast 8. So 800 calories instead of 500. I did an interview for a current affair once, and they asked a very basic question. I thought it was basic. They didn't get much out of me after that. They said, "Why do you think the rules for intermittent fasting have changed from 500 calories on the fasting days to 800 calories?" I said, "Simple. It's not sustainable. It's not enough food. You can't survive on 500 calories a day and have a relationship and have a conversation with someone without, losing your temper, for example. It's going to affect you. And then the other days of 2,000 calories, they are also no carbs. And that is to prepare you to go into a state of ketosis, into a state of what's called autophagy, where the body is starting to use toxic or bad cells that can potentially be cause diseases as a fuel source.
Do you think that that approach is a great one? Like, do you, I guess, agree with that approach, whether it's, keto or fasting or whatever it may be, or do you believe it's unsustainable? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
I don't think it's sustainable. When we looked at the research for an hour on each one, the results for the first 8 weeks were always in favor of whatever what was the most restrictive. So intermittent fasting was more successful, and I'm not against fasting. That's every Abrahamic religion preaches fasting for its benefits, right? And if you look at the books that have been written on intermittent fasting, whether they knew it or not at the time, they were just preaching what the religions say about fasting anyway. They were saying you should fast 1 month a year, and then you should fast twice, at least a couple of days every month, because the body thrives from experiencing the extremes, and it does. Hot, cold. That's why we have contrast therapy. And it was successful for the first 8 weeks, even up to 12 weeks. So was keto dieting. However, when somebody just behaved themselves and ate sensibly and had an education about food, which is what I promote education, learning to be your own nutritionist so that you can navigate the barbecue, navigate dinner with your missus, navigate, family time, and not be in a state of angst all the time, thinking that, okay, if this is a deviation from my diet, then I have to now count that as one of my cheat meals or my refeed meals, which is absolute nonsense. After the 20-week mark, the person who just did the right thing and was mindful about the way that they approached their food, they had success long-term. Their body composition was better. Their level of productivity was better. The amount of neurons firing in their brain was better. Their gut health was also better. Paleo dieting doesn't allow you to have fruit so much. So there are not many foods that help gut microbiome other than the good fats. They say that we were allowed to include fermented vegetables and things like that. But the agricultural revolution hadn't started 2.5 million years ago. I don't think there were many fermented vegetables. And one thing that I'm very, very adamant on is that people should look after their stomach, which is what I like to call the first brain.
Yeah,
and we need fermented produce to do that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. What I really appreciate is when you talk about success, you were talking about productivity, you're talking about gut health, you're talking about like the sustainable approach of doing something. And it wasn't just about weight loss, because a lot of people follow these types of diets in order to just lose weight, but they don't consider just overall health
consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's about how you feel, as well. It's like your energy, your mood, and all of that plays a part in all of this. So what do you think about like the carnivore, animal-based? Because that's trending right now. Like I could jump on TikTok and everyone is just eating meat, right? So let's talk about it. What are your thoughts?
I saw one guy, I think he was a carnivore dieter, and it just came up on my feed, and he was in the supermarket wearing a button-up shirt with it open. And then I was like, okay, this is going to be good, because first of all, he's trying to nobody walks around the supermarket with their shirt open, wearing nothing underneath, in the vegetables section, holding an onion and saying, what happens when you try to peel an onion and eat it? You cry. That's because the onion's self-defense mechanisms are trying to tell you, don't eat me, I am not good for you. Yet on the flip side, it's okay to turn a goat to its side and slit its throat and use that for lunch. That's not really putting up a fight. So the philosophy around we should not be eating vegetables at all, that they're just there by some mere coincidence, and we should only be eating animals, it's a bit far-fetched. And for inflammation, gut health, I had a friend embark on this carnivore journey a couple of weeks ago. He didn't last more than 3 to 5 days. He did say that his energy levels were changing. He got quite a bit of bloating, and it cost him a lot of money because
it's expensive.
He was buying nothing but grass-fed Wagyu meat and the most expensive seafood that money can buy. And you're going to become fussy if the only thing that you're eating is meat. You want that to be quality. And it is a very, very expensive journey. Not sustainable financially, but it's also not healthy for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Inflammation will go through the roof.
let's talk about your food philosophy. I know you touched on it briefly, but talk me through like a typical day of eating. And I know people shouldn't copy what you have, but I'm just really interested in knowing like start to finish, like what is a day on a plate for Moodi? Like what do you eat? What is the philosophy that you actually live by when it comes to food?
Well, at my age, it's very, very gut health is very important. So the way you start the day is critical. And having the 3 fermented products on a daily basis to make sure that you've got good gut microbiome is important too. So a good probiotic is essential. But the 3 fermented elements that I talk about are the fermented beverage, which is apple cider vinegar, the fermented vegetable, pickles, sauerkraut, kimchi, and a fermented dairy product. Paleo doesn't allow dairy either. So the people who did the paleo diet had very low calcium levels. And a fermented dairy product such as kefir or goat's milk yogurt, which are naturally low in lactose anyway because of the fermenting process. The Paleolithic diet that forbids calcium is not just a problem. It wasn't just a problem, and I'll point this out before I go into a day of what I eat. It wasn't just a problem with regards to bone density and osteoporosis and osteoarthritis, but calcium is a key ingredient in fat burning. That's what a lot of people don't understand. The bulk of research around people who had the most success in weight loss all had calcium or dairy in their diets.
Wow.
All of them did.
Did
it's part of the
everyone hear
combustion process.
Did everyone hear that? Because again, another trend is, I'm dairy-free.
I'm dairy-free, I'm
dairy.
lactose-free, I'm gluten-free. Doing things like that is
Yeah.
only going to create an intolerance. Now, if you've got an allergy, then, I feel for you, and that's something that's completely out of your hands. An allergy is different. But usually an intolerance, more often than not, is self-inflicted. If you go gluten-free for 3 months and then you're on a flight and you're going to a third world country and you're forced to eat whatever is available, then and you encounter gluten, you're going to be in a world of pain. And if you decide to try different foods from different cultures and you've been, really following a strict eating plan with no gluten and no dairy, and you're going to have problems. And it's not something that you want your gut to be able to produce the digestive acids and enzymes irrespective of what you consume. Starting the day with some greens powder, apple cider vinegar, some manuka or Yemeni Sudar honey, which is also very, very good for you. That's an ideal way to start the day. I don't like to eat before I train. I just can't function that way. I've only come across one athlete that could do that. After training, the first meal of the day usually has a combination of proteins, carbs, and fats. As the day progresses, it'll be more geared towards carbohydrates and proteins, and then in the latter half of the day, it'll be fats with proteins. It all depends on what the objective is, though. If somebody's goal is to improve body composition, I say something very controversial, which is take a racist approach to food. Colors. So what that means with regards to proteins is that if, let's say you go out for dinner with your partner and the star on the menu is the steak, but it's a very fatty cut of steak, but that's what you want to have. You can go ahead and have that. However, don't have a starchy carbohydrate with it that may spike your insulin levels, which will create a window of opportunity for that fat to be stored or worn as subcutaneous fat, or even worse, visceral fat. Yeah. So if the star of the dish is a carbohydrate, let's say you want to have a pasta or a rice dish, that's fine, but choose a meat that isn't colored. Don't pick salmon, don't pick tuna, don't pick red meat. Pick chicken breast, a white fish, a meat that generally has less fat per 100 grams anyway. So if you do spike your insulin levels from the carbohydrate, there is no fat to be stored, irrespective of what you eat. So if the meat is colored, go with veg and salad, fibrous and cruciferous carbs. If the meat is white, feel free to add your carbohydrates. And generally following that rule of thumb won't cause any problems.
Wow. Can you see me just nodding? I don't know if people can see him on the camera, but I'm just like sitting here nodding. It's just like, wow, it's so interesting because it gets into that granular level, right?
Yeah.
And, we talk a lot about dining out because our food philosophy is all about balanced nutrition. You need to follow what is sustainable.
Yeah.
If you need to be able to do what you do today for the rest of your life, which is
Correct.
most important. And when we talk about dining out, it's really just like everything in moderation and so on. But what you're sharing is at such a granular level, which is so impressive. And like just the way that you explain things as well is just so easy to digest. It takes such a complex topic. Nutrition is so complex.
It is.
It's so great. So I truly believe that the audience has a lot to learn right now, which is awesome.
You're dealing with athletes that don't have a degree in nutrition. Like I made the biggest mistake of my life when I walked into a rugby league club once and I said, "What's your protein intake like?" And someone said, "I just had a dumpling. Is that protein or carbs?" And I thought, I'm at fault here. You're not at fault. There are some athletes who train in the UK and nutrition is part of their curriculum. It's not part of the curriculum here.
Yeah.
So I went in there with the assumption of them knowing what proteins, carbs, and fats were. I had to go all the way back and go at a grassroots level, the same way I would teach a classroom of early teens on what proteins, carbs, and fats are. I've had phone calls from rugby players that are playing in different countries, union, at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m, not checking the time difference, by the way, saying, "Moods, did you get my photo?" And I'm like, "What photo, dude? Who is this? Did someone die? Because it's quite late." And they'll be like, "No, I sent you a photo of the menu. I don't know what to order." So then I thought to myself, I have to teach these guys how to navigate a menu.
Yeah.
Because they're out quite often. I've had players on the road on a bus trip going to Queensland and pull over at the servo not knowing what to have. There were no meal prep companies back then. They weren't rife, right? There's every Tom, Dick and Abdul has a food company. But that's not the case. That wasn't the case back then. There was a McDonald's next door, and I don't condone eating McDonald's, but I was forced to tell this player, go next door, get 2 Big Macs, no fries, take the middle layer of bread out, get rid of the sauce, because out of the 27 grams of fat in there, 17 comes from the sauce. So the macros that we're going to tick off are correct. The quality, rubbish. The quality of the macros are not good. However, it's better than not eating.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Eating something that ticks off the box of like the macro quota for the day as an athlete is far more important than starving yourself and skipping a meal. It's the opposite of what the ideology is for people who compete in men's physique contests or these bikini contests. That person standing on stage, and I've competed before and I've judged
I've competed before. Actually competed for 3 years.
And you know then yourself that the person on stage, when they're with their fake smile on, and I've judged IFBB comps, is at the unhealthiest point in their life.
Absolutely.
When they're up there, yet they are telling everybody this is what the epitome of health looks like. Which is very, very far-fetched.
Yeah. So I appreciate you talking about dining out because it plays a big part in just social settings, right? You have friends, family, partners, and we love to dine out. It's all about socializing. But a lot of people that embark on a health journey, whether it be weight loss or whatever it may be, avoid dining out.
Become social misfits, yeah.
Are there any other dining out tips that you can share?
With regards, other than letting your protein or what you desire dictate what is going to be your choice for the evening, don't allow, a barbecue that's coming up with the family scare you. Don't allow dinner with your partner, your spouse, scare you. Don't allow traveling scare you. The way that you can, bulletproof your diet, and by the way, that's another food ideology, the bulletproof diet. They're just reincarnations of one another. Is to equip yourself with the information that you need in order to navigate. If you know that you're going to have, an active holiday or an active work week, then you can be a little bit more loose with the way that you select your food. But if you're going to a steakhouse, and I've seen people do this, order the poultry dish at a fine dining steakhouse when you go there to have steak. Yeah. Only because the cuts of steak have too much fat in them and they don't want it to count towards their cheat meal or their refeed meal. You can have whatever you want. There's a time and a place for anything. And any diet that tells you that you cannot eat a certain food or have a certain beverage for the rest of your life isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
Oh, preach. I'm so glad you said
paper it's
that.
printed on.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So that takes me on to prophetic eating, because I know we touched on it slightly, but I am so interested in just learning more about it. What is prophetic eating?
It's more about the methodology of approach to food than anything. With a lot of the lectures that I give today, after I started studying Islam in more detail, has been about not just the Quran itself, but also hadith, which are teachings and sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And we look at that approach to food and that sort of minimalist approach to food as the healthiest approach. And we believe, even if you look at artwork from the past, even before the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, if you look at artwork, if you look at research, that's how people ate. They were in a state of gratitude, a state of presence. No one was sitting down eating at the table and playing with their phones. I'm not saying you have to remain silent, you know, but they weren't playing with their phones. They weren't eating separately, or everyone was sitting down at a separate portion of the living room eating. It was an event. Food was an event. And there weren't 15 different types of ingredients amongst 15 dishes. That just wasn't the case, unless it was a banquet. If there was something to celebrate and there was a banquet, that's different. But on average, there were only 2 or 3 ingredients created in a dish. People don't do that today because it's hard to hide bad food with a few ingredients. The hardest dishes, and if you've watched a cooking show, the hardest dishes to impress the judges in a cooking show are the ones that have the least ingredients, because you can't hide behind the flavors and everything else. But combining foods according to biological availability is a big one. Sitting down when you're drinking and eating is also a rule. Don't combine beverages with food. That's another one.
Ooh,
because when you are eating, I'll start with one of the most basic teachings, which is to be sitting down in a state of gratitude, in a state of reflection when you are eating. And research shows that when you do that, your body does different things with food. You get more nutrient absorption, and you are less likely to store your food as fat or get any severe insulin spikes because you're in a state of presence. Now, when I eat a mouthful of food, my brain is analyzing what is in that mouthful. Not just what is in it, but in the exact portion that I have consumed it. So, for example, if I'm having a piece of steak with some sweet potato and greens, preferably not all in this on the one mouthful, but if I do, my brain is saying, okay, Moody's had some greens, some sweet potato, and some steak. And it tells the stomach then to release the necessary acids and enzymes relevant to the food type and also relevant to the quantity that I've just consumed it per mouthful. And that process of communication takes 7 seconds. The food is traveling from the esophagus down to the stomach, small intestine and large intestine at varying speeds. It varies from a speed of 4 meters per second, slowing down to 2 meters per second, speeding up to 3 meters per second. An average of 7 seconds. This abstract algorithm that is happening between the brain and stomach is happening while you're in a state of complete heedlessness. You're not thinking about anything to do with what's going on, yet the brain is doing this remarkable calculation to allow the stomach to produce those acids and enzymes so that you don't get bloating and you absorb your food. If you're sitting down, that's what happens. If you stand, the food gets to the stomach a little bit too quickly. And the brain doesn't have a chance to communicate with the stomach efficiently, and sometimes the food lands there at a rate that is not commensurate with the speed of communication. And that's where you start to have problems and bloating and gastrointestinal distress. And because we stand and we even walk these days while we're eating, we grab a wrap and we walk through the city, rushing between meetings. A lot of experts say that that's a large reason why we have these intolerances to food. Add beverages to the mouthful of food, and you've now diluted the acids and enzymes that are trying to break the food down.
I do that with my Coke Zero. I'm like, oh, bite of my steak. Oh, wash it down with some Coke Zero.
Sometimes it takes about a fortnight to stop doing that.
Wow.
And that's an example, not because it's Coke Zero. Like, I know that, you know, there's I think there was a story on a current affair or 60 Minutes that says Coke Zero causes cancer. It's a bit far-fetched. I know that there are like things like aspartame and artificial sweeteners are carcinogenic, but they don't tell you what how many you have to consume within a 24-hour window, because these things have what's called a chemical half-life.
Yeah.
You would have to consume 300 cans of Coke Zero in a 24-hour window,
I'm so
which
glad
is
you
virtually
addressed
impossible.
This is great that you've
It's
addressed
absolutely
this.
impossible
Yes.
to reach a toxicity through Coke Zero. Yeah, it makes a good story because it's propaganda. But anyway, I don't have a problem with so much with the beverage that you're having, but the temperature of the beverage more so.
Okay, yes, because before we started recording, you actually asked for room temperature water.
Correct.
And I didn't want to ask you why,
Yeah.
because I wanted to save it for the podcast. So tell me why the temperature of your beverage matters.
When you consume food, everything becomes liquefied. And when it becomes liquefied, it's the same temperature as your body, which is approximately 37 degrees. Now, when we get something out of the fridge, it's about 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. When you subject something that's in a liquefied state at 37 degrees to 4 degrees, you're essentially solidifying what is a liquid. And that causes problems. Not just problems in terms of storing this food as fat because you're making it clumpier, you're making it more solidified. But these molecules of proteins and carbs and fats that are moving through your bloodstream, which are the building blocks to nourish you, are not used in the right form. They're not used efficiently the way the body could efficiently use them. The dangerous part about that is that fats, lipids, when they're solidified, that's what causes blockages in the artery. And that's what later on can lead to cardiovascular diseases and stroke and things like this. So something as simple as drinking room temperature water is a far safer and more effective way. And that's why nutritionists should stick to these conversations rather than your average GP. I can't do what a GP does. I'm not going to look at your tonsils and say whether they're inflamed and give you a script for antibiotics. But I saw a show called The Doctors, and they were sitting down saying, did you know that cold water, if you replace your room temperature water every day with cold water, that you'll burn an extra 100 calories per day? Because your body has to heat that cold water up to 37 degrees in order to use it to hydrate you. Now, that's true, but I'd rather not take the risk that I mentioned earlier just so I can burn an extra 100 calories a day. I'd rather do that through exercise or through sensible selection or choice of food, not getting the water to do the job. But that tells you that you cannot hydrate with cold water anyway. Once you reach a state of dehydration, you don't go to the hospital after you've had food poisoning or been vomiting. They don't hand you a bottle of cold water and say, on your way. They put you on a drip. They give you medical grade electrolytes. Cold water is the least effective beverage for hydration.
So how do you recommend people hydrate?
You need 30 mils per kilogram of body weight. There's no such thing as 2 liters for everyone. That's nonsense. It's a good starting point for the layman, but every individual needs 30 mils per kilogram of body weight.
Yep.
So if the individual weighs 60 kilograms, then they would be required to drink 1.8 liters of water per day.
Yeah.
Now, the catch is when you train, the water you drink during training, and hopefully you're doing about half a litre every 30 to 40 minutes, that doesn't count to the quota of 1.8. When you have a coffee, it's got a diuretic effect. You have to replace that every shot, not every cup, because some people have 4 shots in their coffee. So if you have 2 shots of coffee, you owe your body 200 to 300 mils of water, and that water also doesn't count to your daily water intake. If you fly, when you fly, you dehydrate 100 mils to 150 mils per hour of flying. That water also doesn't count to your daily water intake.
So what's the importance of hydration? Why should we keep hydrated?
1/3 of the way you look and feel is water.
Yeah.
Like people ask it, Moodi, what fat burner should I use? I'd simply ask, how much water are you drinking? And they say, no, I'm asking you about fat burners. I'm listening to the question, but what I'm asking you is a lot more valid. Because what I'm asking you has an effect of 1/3, 33.3% recurring, of changing the way you look and the way you feel. What you're asking me may or may not make 1 to 3% of a difference to the way you look and feel. Probably not the way you feel, more the way you look. But sleep is 1/3.
Yeah.
Water is 1/3. And if you don't want to reach a state of dehydration, if you're merely 3% dehydrated, which doesn't take much, you can forget to drink water for a few hours, you'll be 3% dehydrated. When you're 3% dehydrated, your reaction time, your strength, your cognitive functioning all reduces by 20% per 3%.
Thank you for reminding me to drink water.
So if you lose 6%, that's almost 40% less you.
It's insane because people do not put enough of an emphasis on the importance of water in their
Hydration's
day-to-day.
everything.
It is absolute key. And sometimes like when people are feeling bloated or they're lacking energy or they're feeling like some sort of
water.
way, it's like, well, how much water are you drinking?
Yeah.
Talking about like skin problems and so on. Well, how much water are you drinking? And they're like, oh yeah, just like a couple of cups a day.
Yeah, most people don't drink 600 mils of water a day.
Oh, that is
Part of the
it's
questionnaires
insane.
that I give to my patients and clients, I'd say 80%, if not more, will say that I drink or they drink between 600 mils to a litre per day, which translates to, in English, less than a bottle.
It's
They
crazy.
might say they do a bottle to a litre a day, but really it's always, they always overshoot when they're answering these questions, but from experience.
Yeah.
They very rarely finish a bottle of water a day. But then I'll say, oh, but I get a lot of water from my coffee and my tea and my... No. Coffee doesn't... Like I said, you got to compensate water for coffee, and you got to compensate black tea and green tea for as well, because they also contain caffeine.
What are your thoughts on just like sodium, like adding like salt into your water? Because I read a lot
Celtic
about
salt,
that.
yeah.
And then also electrolytes.
Celtic
for
salt and
hydration.
electrolytes do a fantastic way to make sure that you're hydrated. Every second or third bottle that you drink, add a little bit of Celtic salt, some medical grade electrolytes, not Powerade and Gatorade and that sort of stuff. And also finish your day with a cup of peppermint tea as well,
Why?
because that counts to your water intake, but it does wonders for your gut health and digestion, and it improves the way that you absorb water. If your gut is healthy, it improves the way you absorb water. If you couple that with a little bit of dark chocolate, it's even more effective.
Oh, and even more delicious.
Yeah. If you have a little bit of peppermint tea with dark chocolate, it goes really well together. Dark chocolate has more iron than steak anyway. There's more iron in cacao than there is in steak per gram. But what it does, it has this remarkable effect when you couple it with peppermint tea. It causes the intestines to sort of hypercontract. And then if there's any food left in your stomach, it'll guarantee that food is digested and not sitting in your stomach when you're trying to sleep. Because a stomach filled with food keeps your heart rate elevated when you're sleeping, and then you don't really go into that deep sleep. I'm not talking about REM sleep. REM is before deep. We only need about an hour of deep and 2 hours of REM, but you don't get to deep sleep if there is food in your stomach. It's just not possible.
Oh, the topic of nutrition and how it impacts your sleep is something that I so badly want to touch on.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to bring you back and get that just as a podcast just on nutrition and sleep, because
Absolutely, yeah.
it's
Sleep
so important.
is a separate subject in itself, and because there's so much information out there, the medical professional of the past used to be able to encompass everything. The same person that you'd go to for heart disease would be the nutritionist, would be the gastroenterologist, will be the endocrinologist. But now, because science is so deep, there are separate realms of study in every field, and now there are realms of study that connect the two. So, for example, the expert of the brain is the neuroscientist. The expert of the heart is the cardiologist. We used to think that they act as separate entities. Again, the stomach, we think that that's a separate entity. But the neurons in the brain exist in your heart and in your stomach, but they're in greater abundance. So there are more neurons in your heart and in your stomach than there are in your brain. So are you really thinking with your brain or thinking with your stomach? The stomach has more of an influence on your decision-making processes than your brain does.
Wow.
And sometimes you get a gut feeling about something. That's not just a figurative or metaphysical statement. That has value.
It's literal.
It's literal. It's absolutely literal. And there are new realms of study that connect the two. So, for instance, now there's a new area of science called neurocardiology to understand the connection between the brain and the heart, because they're often doing the same thing. They share roles.
It's so interesting. There is so much that we can talk about, but I need to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can just keep going for hours.
Yeah, we can do a podcast about fruit for an hour.
Oh, absolutely. Everything that you've just touched on, we could literally dive into them on a granular level for an hour each. There is just so much to learn. But I do want to end it with just 3 tips you could give to our audience if they're looking to change their approach to diet. So like, what are the first 3 steps, or just 3 tips that you're like, do this is important, and this is what you should prioritize?
I'm going to go back to the prophetic ideologies, which are Be seated in a state of gratitude when you are eating. Don't drink with your food. Drink leading up to the point where you start eating. So drink water, have your warm tea. When the food arrives, stop. Eat your food, wait 10 to 15 minutes, let the digestion process be well underway, then recommence drinking. The other one is eat according to biological availability. To do that simply in English is to teach your clients or your patients to eat things according to the roughness of texture. If something is easy to digest, such as fruit or vegetables, eat that before food. We have a habit of serving people fruit after a barbecue instead of bringing out the sweets because we want to do the right thing. Even restaurants do it these days. It's completely backwards. There are a lot of cultures and societies that still do fruit first, as we did in the past. There are cultures in Spain, in different areas of the Middle East, that they still serve fruit first. If you've got salad and you've got carbohydrates and protein on your plate, eat your salad and your vegetables first. I heard a nutritionist say once in an interview, eat your salad and vegetables first, and then when it comes to the protein, eat your protein next, wait 15 minutes and eat your carbs. Nobody's going to eat that way. No. Nobody's going to go out to dinner, allow their food, half the food on the plate to go cold before eating the rest of it. Eat your salad and vegetables. The fiber will help the digestion process and take the stress off the organs because protein's tough to digest. Protein can take 3 to 4 hours. Salad and vegetables and fruits take 7 to 15 minutes. So you would have that first, but the protein and carbs, you can combine them. They have roughly they have the same digestion rate of 2 to 4 hours. So you can combine those two. If you do that, you're preparing your stomach through the veggies and salad for what it's about to endure. You'll get more nutrient uptake from the food that you eat. Probably won't get any bloating at all whatsoever. You won't end up with food intolerances down the track, and you can enjoy your food too.
I knew I was eating my salad first for a reason. I was really just doing it because I love my protein so much. I'm like, I'll just quickly eat my salad and then save the best to last.
Yeah.
But I knew it had benefits as well.
We used to do that with candy when we were kids.
That's what I do with my salad now, right? Well, Moodi, thank you so much. That was such a great chat. You came with all of the facts, which I loved. And I personally have learned so much. So I know that our audience would take so much from this conversation. Thank you. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I loved being a part of it, and I'll see you at our next one.